As we saw in the last chapter, in the short run, some of the inputs are going to be fixed. So for example, if you rent a space for your business, you have to pay that rent, the rent for that space every month. Now you could decide not to do any business and avoid that rent altogether. So it's not a sunk cost, but if you do any business at all, you're going to pay that rent. So you face a fixed cost of F. Now, how much business you do doesn't affect that fixed cost. However, the amount of inputs you use, so let's say you're renting the space, but then you could choose how much time you're going to spend working in that space, or how many hours of labor you're going to hire. Now, that's a variable input, labor, and the cost of the inputs that you use is not fixed. And so that's what we're going to call the variable cost. And it's going to depend on the quantity of output that you produce. So your total cost is, which we're going to represent by C of Q, is your variable cost for producing Q units of output plus the fixed cost. So in the short run, given this short run cost function, you're going to have a marginal cost. So if you're producing Q units already, what's the extra cost of one additional unit? Remember, marginal always means what's the cost of one additional thing. So marginal is one more. So the cost of one more thing is the marginal cost, and that's just a derivative of the cost function with respect to Q. Now remember, the fixed cost is constant. Right? So cost function C of Q is just V of Q, VC of Q, variable cost, plus this constant F. If I take the derivative of this with respect to Q, this goes away. I get a constant there. And so I just get the derivative of the variable cost. I can also define the notion of an average cost. What does it cost on average to produce one unit? Well, you can split that into two parts. You have an average fixed cost. You have this fixed cost F. So you average that over the number of units you're producing. This is, of course, going to shrink as Q grows large. You have your average variable cost. That's your variable cost divided by the total number of units. Now, your variable cost may rise or fall as the total number of units rises or falls. So the average variable cost may rise or fall as well. So your total average cost, which we represent by AC of Q, this should be a Q here, is the total cost divided by the total number of units. So this is per unit, what does it cost you to produce? Now, C of Q is just the sum of variable cost and fixed cost. So if we divide C of Q by Q, it's the sum of variable cost divided by Q plus fixed cost divided by Q. But we know variable cost divided by Q is just average variable cost. Fixed cost divided by Q is average fixed cost. This is the thing you want to know about, average cost, is what you want to know about if you want to figure out whether you're making a profit or not. If you're selling at a price that's higher than your average cost, it means that on average, it costs you less to produce the units you're selling than what you're getting for them. Then you're making a profit. If you're selling at a price lower than your average cost, it means you're making a loss. Let's do a solved problem to illustrate what these concepts are. So let's suppose we start with this cost function. So our cost function is cost of producing Q units is 100Q minus 4Q squared plus 0.2Q cubed plus 450. So the first thing we want to do is figure out what the fixed and variable costs are. It's clear to see here the fixed cost is just 450 and the variable cost is everything else. So the fixed cost is 450, variable cost is this bit here, which depends on Q. So we'll be able to calculate the marginal cost. Remember, the marginal cost is a derivative of the cost function with respect to Q. So let's plug in our cost function here and take the derivative with respect to Q. So the first term, we get 100 Second term we get minus 8q. In the third term we get 0.6q squared. And the last term, the derivative of 450 with respect to q, it's a constant, so it's 0. So our marginal cost is 100 minus 8q plus 0.6q squared. What about average variable cost? Remember, the variable cost was this part, not the 450. So we take the average variable cost is just variable cost divided by q. So we take 100 minus 4q squared plus 0.2q cubed, divide by q. So this q goes away. This q becomes a q squared becomes a q. This q cubed becomes q squared. So we cancel out this q. So we get 100 minus 4q plus 0.2q squared. That's our average variable cost. What's our average fixed cost? Remember, it's just a fixed cost divided by q. So 450 was our fixed cost, divided by q, we get 450 over q. Finally, we can now calculate the average cost, which is just total cost divided by q, which we could just add up our average variable cost and our average fixed cost to get 100 minus 4q plus 0.2q squared plus 450 divided by q.